Welcome to this video of aspireforgmat.com. Before attempting this question, please take the practice test at www.aspireforgmat.com and then verify your answers against this video, which will be available after you answer the question at our site. The link for the free Aspire for GMAT course is also available in the description box below. Just register on the site and enroll for the course. There are many such tests available. If you have any doubts or queries that you would like us to clarify, post in the GMAT forum and we will answer your questions. Our instructors can also solve these problems in a video which will be available at our site for your benefit. The question we are going to discuss now is again an algebraic question. Now the question is something like this. A certain group of car dealership agreed to donate X dollars to a Red Cross chapter for each car sold for a 30-day period. What was the total amount that was expected to be donated? So the only thing that the question tells us is that a certain car dealership or someone was ready to donate X dollars per car for a 30-day period. Now they want to know how much amount was expected to be donated. That is, suppose Y cars were donated, Y cars were sold, X into Y would be the total amount that was donated. Now the only two options or the only two statements that give us help in order to solve this question are the first one, a total of 500 cars were expected to be sold. So in this case, Y is equal to 500. And the second one says 60 more cars were sold than expected, so that the actual amount donated was $28,000. Now let's try to solve this question and see how we can find the value. Now let's see how to solve this particular question. The question says that a certain group of car dealership agreed to donate X dollars to a Red Cross chapter for each car sold for a 30-day period. So if we convert this into, let's convert it line by line into an equation or a variable form, because from our first reading we know that it has to be an algebraic sum. So let's try to split every sentence into variables or equation form. Now from our first reading we know that X dollars per car is the amount of donation that was expected to be given for that 1 month period. So that would become, donation is supposed to be X dollars per car. Now the number of cars, what was the total amount that was expected to be donated? So to know the total number of amount that was expected to be donated, we should know the total number of cars. We don't know the total number of cars. Let the total number of cars be Y. If we knew the total number of cars that was initially expected to be sold, then the expected donation, that is what we are supposed to find over here. If you notice, expected to be donated, the total amount that was expected to be donated. So the total amount that was expected to be donated would be X into Y. But we don't know what Y is. So if we just knew either what Y is, if we knew what Y is, we would be able to find out, and X is, we would be able to find out the expected donation. However, that is not given. So let's try to work out the statements that are given. The first statement says a total of 500 cars were expected to be sold. So it gives us the value of Y. Cars expected to be sold is 500. So if definitely Y is equal to 500, because we initially assumed that variable Y represents the number of cars that were expected to be sold. So the total expected donation was 500 into X. However, we still don't know what X is. So, and we cannot find it out because we are not given any other value that could in some way help us derive the value of X. So this is insufficient. Now the second option. Okay, now since this is insufficient, we know A cannot be the answer, D cannot be the answer, because A says first option is sufficient for us. We know first option is insufficient. D says both of them are sufficient. We know both of them, first option is insufficient. So D is not the answer. Now the answer could be B, it could be C, it could be E. Now let's try to find out whether second option is sufficient. Now 60 more cars were sold than expected, so that the actual amount donated was $28,000. Now this says that 60 more cars were sold than expected. We still don't know the number of cars that were expected to be sold, so let's just consider those cars to be Y. Just like before, Y cars were expected to be sold, and 60 more cars were sold. So total cars sold were Y plus 60. So the donation would be Y plus 60 into X, and this would be equal to $28,000, because that was the total amount, that was actual amount that was donated. So the total donation was 28,000, and that was because of the X dollars donated for Y plus 60 cars. However, we still don't know what Y and X are. There is no other clue. Now if you see in this equation, there are two variables, two unknowns, Y and X, and we have just one equation. We cannot find out what Y and X are. If we just also there's another matter you can consider over here. We just need to find out X into Y. We don't need to find out X and Y individually actually, because the total expected donation is just supposed to be X into Y. However, here since we have 60s X, if you multiply this X with the bracket, with the numbers in the bracket, you would have X into Y, that's fine, plus 60x. Now we cannot solve the 60x, so this is not going to give us the answer. This is clearly insufficient. So now we already had only B, C and E as the answer. We know that B is not the answer, because B says that B should be, second option should be sufficient. Now second option is not sufficient, so B is not the answer. It could be either C or E. If both the answers together are sufficient, it's C. If they are not sufficient, even when taken when considered together, then it is E. Now let's consider those options together. Now from 1 we know that cars expected to be sold, that is Y, is equal to 500. From the second option we know that actual number of cars sold was Y plus 60, 560. Now this Y plus 60, we already know Y is equal to 500, so it's just 560. So the total actual donation would be 560 into X. Here we had Y plus 60 into X. Here if you see, we had Y plus 60 into X. Now we have, instead of this Y plus 60, we know this Y is equal to 500, so it's 560 into X, and that is equal to 28,000. Now comes the part where you need to act smart, and you don't need to sit and solve for the answer, because this is a data sufficiency question. All you're supposed to answer is whether this is enough to answer the problem, to give a value, give a yes or no answer to the question, to give a value, to give the answer to the question. So we know here 560x is equal to 28,000. We can derive x. If we divide 28,000 by 560, we will get a constant. And if we have that constant, we can calculate the donation expected initially, because we know the donation expected initially was x into y. X is a constant which we can find out. Y we know is already 500. It's mentioned here from the first statement that y is 500. So 500 into x, which is a constant, is equal to the answer. And we can find out the value of x. It's just that we're not bothering to find out. It would take another maybe 30 seconds to solve the problem, but we don't have that 30 seconds during the exam. So that's it. We know that this is sufficient. Together, taken together, the two statements are sufficient. So the answer cannot be E, because both the statements taken together are sufficient. So the answer is C.